Hi, I'm Rob Grimm with RGG EDU. We're sitting down with Tony Roseland today to talk about his life and his career in the photo business after we just wrapped a big week of your product tutorial.
Big week, yeah.
Feels good to have it over with, doesn't it?
That's an understatement.
Yeah, it is. Here you go.
Yeah,
Cheers,
huge
buddy.
understatement.
Always have to have a little whiskey when you
It helps,
do something like
especially after a week like this.
that. All right. So, one of the first things I want to talk about is your history in the business, because you are kind of unusual in that you're third generation.
It's not the first time I've heard that one.
Yeah, yeah. But being third generation is really cool.
Yeah, I think so, you know.
You and I know each other pretty well.
Sure.
To say the least. But I think that the audience needs a little bit of history. I think it's really fascinating what your grandfather did and what your father did. It's really cool how you came up in it. So will you share some of that with us?
Sure, yeah. You know, the family has a long history in photography. My grandfather was a master photographer in Sweden and came over to the United States when he was a young man and was trying to get work in New York. But at the time, all of the New York photo houses were looking for interns and assistants and PAs and things like that. They didn't want a shooter with his experience in there, so he had a hard time finding work in New York back then, you know. So he ended up heading down to Northern Virginia, DC area, and he worked for Harrison Ewing, which was a huge photo house down there. They did mostly portraits and things, and he was assigned to Blair House, which, if you're unfamiliar, is the kind of the guest quarters for the White House. So he spent most of his career there doing portraits for dignitaries that would come in from out of town, you know, whatever, foreign countries, etc. Eventually got picked up by the King of Morocco to be the official photographer for that. Oh. That was awesome.
So our steer head just collapsed and shattered, but that's okay, I guess. So we're going to keep going.
It's not every day. The steer head collapses and shatters during the middle of an interview.
There's steer pieces around the studio.
That was awesome. So
King of Morocco. Let's go back to the King of Morocco.
King of Morocco. So there, you know, he was shooting for the King of Morocco. He'd fly him out every few years. He'd do the King's official photos and then family photos, things like that. Eventually, my father became of age and started working in the studios back in DC with my grandfather. By this time, he had opened his own studio and labs out east. He wasn't working for Harrison Ewing area.
In your grandfather's business. He did his own thing?
No, he was working for my grandfather, but my grandfather wasn't with Harrison Ewing anymore.
It.
So he was working, doing photos for the King of Morocco. He had opened a studio, opened a lab. My dad came of age, started working with him. So now it's my grandfather and my father running studios and labs out east. My dad started going over to Morocco, photographing the king. They photographed the princess's wedding. So yeah, that's pretty cool, you know. So,
you guys have negatives of all this, I hope?
Yeah. Unless they've molded out or faded out by now, you know. But yeah, it's we got all that stuff on file. So they used to have to give proofs to the king, 16 by 20 mounted prints as proofs, fully retouched.
I love that. That's,
you know,
fully retouched.
Yeah, 16 by 20 mount prints, and somebody would hold them up, and the king would be like, no, next, you know, and they just go through them all till he found one he wanted. Good, and then they'd roll.
So how many prints would they take over?
Oh shit, I don't know, hundreds. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. So, but anyway, back to the United States. So my grandfather was the first lab in the United States to process color Agfa film. There was nobody else in the United States doing it, and because he was bringing the supplies in from Sweden, so he had access to the supplies to process that. The only other color film in the United States at the time was Kodak, and you had to have special process to do Kodak film. So. Anyway, my grandfather moved down to Boca Raton, Florida with his other son. My dad stayed behind, bought the studios in Northern Virginia from him, and that's kind of when I got into the game and started spending time after school there, working in the darkroom, working in the lab, doing some passport photos, that kind of stuff with my dad, you know. And I learned a lot of it just through osmosis, you know, just by being around photography.
You're there every day, absorbing it.
Every day. I'd get off the bus after school at the studio, and I'd spend my afternoons there. So, you know, I learned a lot there that I didn't know I was learning. You know, you really don't. You just kind of you're absorbing this stuff. You know, so. And then I joined the service for a while, and my my father ended up selling everything out east and moving out west to San Diego area, and he works
After
part-time.
college, did you do college?
I didn't do college, man.
Right.
No way.
You did the
School
high
of
school
hard
thing.
knocks, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then
So high school, studio, Navy, back into photography.
got it.
There was some other stuff in there here and there, but that's, you know,
The Navy was kind of crazy.
the Navy was a little nuts.
You were in SEAL training
I did SEAL training. I got hurt.
by an instructor. He killed you in the last week.
Yeah.
Hell Week. You made it all the way to Hell
in
Week?
Hell Week, yeah, in Hell Week. Yeah, it's certainly not the last week, but it's certainly one of the most painful ones.
Oh, Hell
yeah.
Week is not the last week? I thought that was it. Once you made it through that, you were done.
No, they weed you out pretty early on. Either you get through Hell Week or you don't. Unfortunately, I was one of the ones that didn't, you know, but whatever. I've grown because of it. But, you know, I'd be doing something totally different now. If I'd made it through that, you know, I'd be, who knows? Who knows
What
where
was
I'd
the
be.
impetus to go in the Navy in the first place? I mean, you were already kind of established in the world of photography in terms of coming up through the family ranks. Why split?
Yeah, well, you know, if your parents are attorneys, the last thing in the world you probably want to be when you grow up is an attorney, you know?
Yeah, I get
So I was in portrait studios, and I didn't really know that commercial photography or any other photography existed other than what I'd been around. So I just wanted to get as far away from that as possible. So I went a totally different direction. My dad actually did serve in the Navy, but he didn't go through SEAL programs or anything like that. So I did that. I, you know, saw the world, came back, and realized that I didn't want to be in the service. I didn't like, you know, people telling me what to do. You know, get up at 3 a.m. and push jeeps, you know, whatever the heck. You know?
Yeah, that
So
doesn't sound
that
fun.
wasn't for me. But, you know, I did learn attention to detail, and I learned to be on time. You know, and I'm punctual. I'm usually never late for anything, which helps
Regimented,
in what we
yeah.
do. You know, it really does. Yeah. So I also learned how to run a crew. You know, I had people working under me there, and I learned how to manage them and be a leader in that sense. So it's helped me in my business. So it's kind of a different schooling than going to college or whatever. It was more OJT more than anything else. So I came back and did some odd jobs. Eventually got
Came
back
back
into photography. Came back to the United States. I was overseas, you
Right.
know, for a lot of that.
But are you coming back to Seattle? You're
No,
coming
at
to
the
East
time
Coast? Where?
I went back to San Diego because the whole family had relocated. You know, they'd sold the businesses back east and moved out there. So that's where I separated and met my wife, and we ended up moving. We wanted to get out of the whole Southern California lifestyle, keeping up with the Joneses, cost of living, all of that. You know, the weather is great, but there's so many other things about it that were just giving us headache that we moved up north to Washington. It's a beautiful state. Cost of living is way cheaper. My wife runs a very successful private practice up there, and I'm able to get a studio at a reasonable rate. You know, trying to rent the space that I have in Washington in Southern California would,
It cost you an arm and a leg.
you know, it's ridiculous.
Right.
So it works out great up there. We like it a lot. You know, we get the 4 seasons and all that good stuff, and it's just a cool place to live. And you know, I opened my studio up there in 2008, and I opened as a portrait, wedding, baby, maternity, architectural, senior, commercial, you know, whatever photographer.
Just a
you
couple
know?
things.
Yeah, you know, and I hadn't really figured out what it was I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do photography. And quickly found that I didn't want to do weddings. I didn't want to do portraits and seniors or maternities or babies or. You know,
How many weddings did it take to
yeah.
realize
Oh,
that?
I knew after the first one, but I've shot plenty of weddings, you know. And,
I've done exactly 2 in my life. I will never do another one. They were both for friends, and it's never going to happen
Yeah,
again.
the last one I did before I said it, I said I'd never do another wedding, and then my sister wanted to get married, so I said, okay, so she asked me to do it. I had to shoot their wedding, you know.
Really?
Yeah.
But you got to be a part of that wedding. You can't.
I was the officiant. I was the officiant. I was the
And the
photographer. Yeah, I was all kinds of things in that
low-budget
wedding.
wedding.
Yeah, talk about being a part of it. Yeah, so, you know, good for her. You know, I was happy to do it for her. I'm not the best wedding photographer, admittedly. You know, and I try to tell them that. Listen, I'm not the best wedding photographer, but I think it meant something to them aside from the cash savings that they got from.
What do you think made you not the best wedding photographer? And what were your limitations?
You know, it's really, it seems like the same thing over and over again. It's the same process. Somebody that's been shooting weddings for a while probably knows exactly in what order everything happens every time. It's always the same. It's just 2 different people, you know,
Right.
maybe a different location. Usually you shoot in 6 or 10 of the same locations all the time, so even that becomes familiar. With what we do, it's different with every job, you know. It's always a different product. It's always a different scene that they want. It's always a different lighting look that they want, you know. So
Often it's a different set of clients. You're working with new people all the time.
yeah, you know, that stuff changes over. So I
So
think,
how long did it take of doing weddings and babies and maternity?
Oh,
to
a
say,
year.
All right.
1 year.
Done.
Yeah, 2008. I got there in 2008, so by the end of 2009, I was over that pretty quick, and I was doing product photography.
What'd you start with?
Yeah, I figured that was the next question.
what'd you start with?
A guy walked in with a box of skateboard wheels, and he
Nice.
said, "Can you photograph these?" I said, "Yeah, of course, I can photograph anything."
Of course you could.
Yeah, I
Yeah. Scratched
Whatever.
your head for days on that
No
one, didn't you?
problem. Yeah, yeah. Pure white background, sure, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to light the product from the front enough to get a pure white background and everything.
Oh yeah, not a good idea.
All the mistakes that, you know. So, you know, and that's funny now. Wasn't funny then.
Right.
You know, I was trying to figure it out at the time. You know, I figured that was the way you had to do it, you know, but a lot of trial and error, you know. So I didn't have, you know, I come from a family of photographers, but I didn't have them to fall back on for stuff like that.
That's a totally different genre.
Yeah, man, portrait and wedding is not product photography. So, but what I did find out by shooting those wheels is all the new challenges that it gave me some independence. You know, I was still doing photography, but it wasn't what Dad and Granddad did. You know, it was a little bit of independence. It was like, yeah, I'm doing photography, but I'm doing something different that you don't know how to do, kind of a thing. You know?
So you're following it in the family footsteps while blazing your own trail at the same time, which is cool.
You got it, man. That's it.
That's cool.
That's kind of it. And I've always been that way. You know, a little bit of a black sheep. You know.
Oh yeah, I'm the black sheep of the family. That's for sure. I like that position. I think it's a good place to be.
Yeah, I'm. You know, I'm all right with it.
has
As a
its ups
kid,
and
maybe
downs.
not, but as an adult, I can deal with it. Yeah.
Right. So skateboard wheels, then it turns into what? Like, how do you go out and start getting clients from there? Like, what? You're in a new city. You haven't been there that long.
Right.
You're developing your new, you know, career here as a product photographer. What next? How do you go about finding business and
You
getting
know,
people in the door?
I got lucky. I got word of mouth. So the guy I was shooting skateboard wheels for used to own, before he was doing skateboard wheels, he owned a suspender company.
Okay.
And the people that bought the suspender company were all the way on the other side of the country in Maryland. And they said, okay, we have the suspender company now, we need to get photos done. And he said, well, I've got a young guy here who's doing some photos for my skateboard wheels. I can put you in touch with him. And they said, great. So they called me from Maryland and said, we hear you doing some work for this person. We'd love to have you do some work for us. And I said, wow, okay, what are we talking? And it was hundreds and hundreds of SKUs, you know.
Really?
Way in over my head. No idea what I was doing. So,
Baptism by fire, buddy.
yep, that's it, you know. And so they sent a few pieces out as test shots, and he did it on all white, you know. And so I horsed around until I got some good looking images out of it. And I gave him a quote that I thought was way high, you know. There's no way they're going to go for this, you know. And they didn't blink an eye. Sure, let's do it. They boxed up a bunch of suspenders, sent them out to me, and I started shooting. In fact, I flew my dad up as an assistant. I had a little assistant fee in there, which was just enough to cover his ticket.
Right on.
I didn't know who else to ask. I didn't know anybody yet in the town, really, you know. So I flew
that's
him up
amazing.
from San Diego to help me out. And so the two of us just kind of worked through the images, and we got through hundreds and hundreds of suspenders. And to this day, they're still one of my favorite and best clients. I mean, they do a lot of business with me still. Now we've
That's awesome.
refined the process, you know,
Right.
we've worked it out, and I think hopefully we've made ourselves, you know, we've leveraged ourselves into a position that nobody else can create the same images that we do for them, you know. So
Yeah, you make yourself invaluable, right?
exactly, you know. So.
Why did you think the price was so high? Was it completely because you didn't have experience?
Yeah,
or-
well, both. I didn't have experience at this for one, and two, it's more than I'd ever made on any job previously. You know, I just wasn't charging, you know, I think it was a 5-figure job. It was my first 5-figure job,
Right.
you know, and this was my second commercial job, you know. And I'm like, this is nuts, you know, nobody's gonna pay me this money, you know. And when you're used to getting $100 or $200 for senior sessions or something, it's just not,
Yeah.
you know, so.
I think that's a really hard thing for people to do is to figure out the value of their photography. Like, what do I really charge?
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this a lot. You've called me for advice over the years, you know, trying to figure out exactly where to place your numbers. Had you, at this time, did you know what other people were charging? Like, you just kind of were winging it.
Yeah, totally winging it, man. You know, God, I don't even remember how I came up with the pricing for that. I think I figured out, I jumped online and grabbed a cost of doing business calculator, and I had a studio and I had some equipment and some cameras and things. And so I put all that stuff in there and I kind of figured out what I needed to make per day. And I figured out what I thought I could shoot in a day as far as the number of suspenders. And then I finally came up with a number, and it came up to be a huge number. And I said, this is what it's going to cost. And I thought, I'll never see that job, you know, but they went for it, and they're still going for it. And
So do you think that it was undervalued? Like, is it
that
such
first shoot?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a value for them. They're like,
Oh, yeah. I mean, looking back at it now, I'm like, I could have charged them 3 times and it still would have been a deal, you know?
right.
And I've raised my prices over the years with them. And it was a simple conversation. Like, when I started this, it was a different process, a different time. I was in a different point in my career. At this point, doing catalog photography of suspenders is time consuming. You know, I've worked out, you know, the process to make it more efficient, but still I think there's more value there than what I'm charging. If I need to continue growing my business and making money and supporting staff and things like that, then I've got to charge more money. And if they walked, I would have understood, you know. But
That's a hard conversation to have.
It's a terrible conversation to have, you know, but they were understanding. They're good people. I try to work with good clients, and fortunately these are great clients, and they understood. They're running business too, you know, and they said, we get it. Whatever you think is fair, we trust you that you're going to be fair with us, and we'll be fair with you. And so
That's the right kind of client to have.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So,
Yeah, it is.
yeah.
So you go into suspenders, and it just starts going from there, right?
Yeah, still word of mouth, you know. Gosh, what came after that? I'm trying to remember. You know, I started shooting for portfolio stuff. I started shooting interesting stuff for portfolio. I'm thinking, okay, I'm doing all this. I'm making decent money now. Bring on the ad agencies, you know? Where are they all? Why aren't they knocking down my door yet? You know?
Because they don't know about you.
Yeah, they don't know about me yet. So the next one was an e-cigarette company. And they had seen some of the images that I had of skateboard wheels and suspenders, you know, and then I had shot a few things for my own book, and we'd taken all that stuff and put it together. And I say we, but I mean me. I took all that stuff and put it together, had built a website with this stuff on it, you know, and so I got an electronic cigarette company who was just, at the time, one kiosk in the mall. And they were selling these electronic cigarettes they were ordering from wherever and having them branded for their company. Now they're a huge company. They have like a dozen stores. They do multi-millions of dollars every year, and they're still using me for all their catalog photography. So, you know, that's what I've been fortunate with, is getting in with these companies when they're small and growing with them, and they continue to use me because we were fair to each other through the entire growth process. They're watching me grow, I'm watching them grow. We're both benefiting from each other, you know, so.
And it's building a relationship, which I say all the time, that's what this business is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got to build this relationship. I mean, here you've got the suspender company that was like your second job, your first real big job. The money freaked you out, and you've been able to not only give them the work that they want and need, but you guys have built this nice relationship and demand respect from each other and elevate your fees as you continue to work together year after year after year.
Yep, you got it. That's exactly how it's gone. And it
Which,
keeps
by the
going.
way, that's the perfect success story. That's exactly what people need to strive for in this business. It's that what you're doing is exactly what they need.
Yeah, I mean, not everybody is an overnight success. You don't go out and land, you know, some big company on day one and you're working in the ad world from then on. It's rare. There's a few people that get that, you know, but I think it's important for people to understand that you got to start somewhere. And if you start small and you're fair to people and you're doing good work, that reputation is going to build. You're going to build those relationships, and those companies could grow into big companies, you know. So and that's fortunately what it's been for us. It's just little companies growing into big companies, and when the big companies talk to other big companies, we pick up business from there. And you know, so now it's not small companies talking to small companies anymore. These companies are big companies, and they're telling other big companies, and so the work is bigger now. We're at a bigger level. It's good.
Sounds like the majority of your work comes from word of mouth, not advertising so much. Social media, yeah, but word of mouth is far and away the best for you.
Yeah, I'd say a good 70-80% of our work is word of mouth.
I would say that when I started, all of it was word of mouth. You know, it was one of those things you really had to, and I know I had to knock on a lot of doors, but I came up through another studio and was working with some of their lower echelon clients, and it was word of mouth. And you cannot undervalue that in any respect. I mean, it's amazing what the power of word of mouth can do for building a photography career.
Yeah, and other photographers, funny enough, refer clients our way too, you know.
That's good.
I've got relationships with other photographers who don't do product work, don't do commercial work. They do babies and bellies or, you know, weddings or whatever. And if I have somebody that says, hey, you know, do you do weddings? I say, no, but XYZ
Right.
does, and I refer them. And when XYZ gets somebody asking if they shoot products, they go, no, but this guy does, and they refer them to me. So there's a little bit of a networking going on just among photographers. You know?
Yeah, that's a great point. Every city has a photo community, and in some cities they're really paranoid and they don't want to talk to each other.
Right.
And in other cities they're open, and it's like I know people who are open and will refer back and forth.
Yeah.
They get more work.
Yeah.
We're in the
it's
same.
silly.
We're in the
It's
same
silly,
boat,
isn't it?
Right. Yeah. It's a sea. We're in the same boat. Let's help each other out.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
Why try to drown each other? You know.
Yeah, it's really a silly idea. You know, same thing with sharing information. You know, I know when I was talking about doing this tutorial with others, they're like, you're going to tell people all this stuff? Aren't you worried about losing business from that? You know? No. I want people to start creating better images.
Absolutely.
You know? A, I'm tired of looking at crappy images. And
There's
B,
a lot out there.
Yeah, and B, I think that the more that clients see good imagery, the more there's going to be a demand for it, you know, and then we can all make more money. At least that's the hope. Maybe I'm wrong. Time will tell.
How big is Spokane?
$250,000 proper, about $500,000 for greater.
Right. Small market.
Yep.
You feel comfortable in a small market, starting, expanding out. Now you're moving into Seattle.
Yep.
Right. How's that shaping up? What's that kind of plan like for you?
You know, it's a little intimidating because I don't have a whole lot of connections in Seattle, but I feel that we've grown to a point, or at least my skills have grown to a point that I would be competitive, very competitive in that marketplace. So now I'm comfortable spending the money that I need to get into that marketplace. You know, if I'd gone over there when I got that first suspender gig, it would have been a waste. I would have been
You would have burned
annihilated.
out.
You know,
Right. You would have flamed out rather.
flamed out, whatever you want to put with that. It wouldn't have been a success story. You know, it would have just been. It probably would have broke me, to be honest. You know, I would have invested money over there, spinning my wheels, trying to get business that I wouldn't have got, and I'd probably be out of business. You know, but we're at a point now where we are. We've maxed out what we can do in our area as far as the client base there that can afford us, to be honest. You know,
Right.
so we need to move out of that area so that we can open up our business to a client base that can afford to pay what we're charging to do work the right way. You know.
The reason I bring that up is it speaks about growth. You know,
Yeah.
you've been patient, you learned your market, you did word of mouth in your market, you went out there, did a good job for people, and started to grow and grow and grow, and now you can reach into a bigger market. I had the same experience, you know, with St. Louis and going into Chicago.
Yeah, you've been there.
Been there, and I want other people to know that it takes time. This is not something you do overnight. You have to be incredibly patient in this business,
Very
or you
much
are
so.
not going to get there.
No, you're just gonna crash and burn. You know?
There are a few people that like seem to come out of nowhere
Yeah.
and make it big, but they are few and far between. Like literally 1 in a million.
That's not the norm by any means.
Oh my
you
God,
know. We're gonna go over there. We got a studio that we're looking at. We're negotiating on right now, and so if all that comes through, we should be there early 2015. And I'm working on a new book, trying to get that all
New
done.
book?
New book. Trying to get a new book put together.
All right.
You know, get some new imagery done. We're working with some new cameras and things that we got, you know, and we're going to try to put together this new book with some really cool imagery that we haven't shared anywhere yet.
Right.
And just start taking that around and showing it to the Seattle market. You know, I want to make them the first ones to see this stuff, you know.
How much time do you spend working on your book? I think a lot of people have the perception that when a photographer gets busy, they're just shooting all the time, which isn't the case.
Wish.
We work quite a bit, but then we're accounting quite a bit, and we're working on our portfolio, and we're planning. So how does your kind of life break down in terms of how much are you shooting, how much are you working on your book, how much are you planning?
Not enough of any of that. there's not enough
You're
time in a
behind the
day,
times.
man. There's just not enough time in a day.
I know,
you
it's
know,
crazy.
it seems that as your business grows, you get behind the camera less and less. I mean, I spend more time
Yes.
paperwork, accounting, running a crew, trying to keep those relationships built, trying to put together estimates and invoices, and trying to handle the payroll and all the other stuff that goes along with running a business. And I spend less time behind the camera. I'd like to say that, X percent of my time is towards my book, but it's really whenever I can squeeze it in. If I'm shooting for a client on a project and I have a hot set, I might try to work one of my own ideas in after the fact. Use that time, try to be efficient with what we already have going on.
How many images that wind up in your portfolio do you think come from jobs versus sitting down and doing a portfolio?
I'm going to say probably 30% of my book is actual commissioned work. The other 70% is just my own, mind to pixels, trying to get stuff out on print.
Mind to pixels, I like that phrase.
Yeah.
Is that an original Tony Roosevelt?
Yeah, just on the spot right now. We might improve it by the time the interview is done. Maybe I can come up with something better, but
Yeah, it's hard to quantify. I think I'm probably behind the camera less than 20% of the time. Far less,
yeah.
I would think.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about how much time I spend behind the camera, yeah,
It's almost weird.
yeah.
Because you get into this business to have a camera in your hand, but you got to run a business, which means you got to put the camera down.
Yeah, and we've just hired a second shooter who's handling a lot of the catalog photography stuff. Sorry to say, like the suspender gig, the smart, the e-cig gigs, that stuff. I'm not shooting it anymore.
Why sorry to say? You're passing that baton. You're obviously still going to have it as a profit center. You wouldn't be doing it, and that frees you up to do new work, better work, keep growing and climbing the ladder. That's what you want.
It is what you want, but you still have some attachment because, at least I do, because I feel that that's kind of where I got my start in commercial photography.
Right.
And now someone else is handling that for me, and it's like, geez, I still have creative control. I'm still telling them what I want done and how I want it done, but I'm not actually pulling the trigger anymore, And I wish it was because I was off creating these rock star images, but I'm probably in reality sitting behind a desk, figuring out what the payroll is for that person next week, But
Yeah.
I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer and a bummer. It's just,
Really, you're not. It's a reality check.
I wish
it's a business.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I was going in the studio, flipping on the lights every morning, going hot set, and creating some cool stuff. I wish I had that kind of time, but I've got a daughter. I've got to wrap up by 4:45 so I can be home to the nanny by 5. I've got to spend time with the family on weekends. I can't spend all day Saturday and Sunday in there, So for the people who don't have kids and don't have spouses and, don't have another job or whatever, take the time to build your book, while you have that opportunity. Go out and network, go to the parties, make that relationship thing happen,
Not only that, get the experience that you need so that you can run a job. Because when you're on a job, people do have to get home by 5:30, 6 o'clock so they can get kids. So you've got to make art, you've got to do whatever needs to be done for the job. You have to, achieve the goals of the job by 5 o'clock or 5:30, so everybody can
by
go.
5 o'clock,
Yeah.
so everybody can go home. Yeah,
It's art on the clock. It's a really hard thing to do, which is very different from when you're doing your portfolio. When you're just kind of hanging out, you can stay in your studio till midnight. You can do whatever you want. It's a portfolio piece. When you're doing it with a crew, you got to get done.
And that's the thing about like this tutorial that I did this week, is that it's going to hopefully help people see what it's like to do a whole variety of images, give them a whole bunch of new tricks for their bags so that when they're on a job like that, they can dig into that bag of tricks and hopefully get through it quicker instead of having to figure it all out on their own. They can go, I've already been through this, I watched the tutorial, I know how to handle this, and they can execute the shot and everybody gets to go home on time,
Is there any one piece in the tutorial that you think is like the gold mine that people need to know about? Like, is there something they really need to pay attention to over everything else? Or is it a collective of, because you definitely put together a great step-by-step, and it's a nice building series of how to start at the base and keep moving yourself up and get there.
Yeah.
It's a building process.
I think it is, I think if they're going to take one thing away or two things away, one is just a small, shoot tethered. I think that's a big deal. Trying to figure stuff out in the back of the camera
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous, right? I mean, as cool as those LCDs
never
are
do
these
that.
days, 150 billion pixels or whatever they are, get it on a big screen, check your focus, look for dust, check your composition, check your color, The other thing is that in some of the big ad shots that we did in the tutorial, one light, use one light. It's not about how much gear you have or use. We got
how
a
you
whole
manipulate
studio
it.
full of gear here. I
Right.
could have used any of it. I used one light,
Right.
and it was probably one of the most least expected modifiers they would have seen me use. So don't get hung up on having to have a ton of fancy equipment and all that stuff. It's use what you need to get the shot. Use the right tool for the job and know how to use that tool is the thing. Knowing how to use it. If this Para 88 would have been the right tool for the job, I would have grabbed it, but it wasn't. The thing I did was the right tool for the job, and I knew that, and that's just through experience, trial and error, and practice. And no, I'm sure I probably lit the same thing with something like that in the past, and it looked like crap, So I knew what trick to pull out of the bag, and,
Right.
and that's what I went with. So
So know your equipment is the
know
is
your
the lesson.
equipment, and don't think that it's all about the best equipment. It's not about having the most expensive or the most amount of equipment. It's just about knowing how to use the equipment that you have, or knowing which equipment that you need to have.
So what's next for you? Like, are you looking down the road thinking 5, 10 years? What kind of stuff do you want to do with your career?
I'm hoping Seattle turns in to give us a connection with bigger brands. I want to get on with bigger brands. I want to get away from as much of the catalog work and direct work that we've been doing. Not because I don't like the people that I've built the relationships with, but because I want to see how far I can take it. I'm an artist,
Right.
I just want to see how far I can take this thing, And I want to take it. I want to land the big accounts, and I want to do these really big projects. And I want to walk down the street and go, "That's my billboard. That's my billboard. That's my banner." Open up a magazine and go, "That's mine. That's
Right on.
mine, and that's mine." That's cool. That's fun.
It's way cool. Yeah, I know the
you-
feeling. I do know the feeling. It's cool.
So
it's cool
that's my goal, is to get there, and it's not for anything other than self-satisfaction. It's a totally selfish goal. I want to see if I can do it.
That's honest.
We're doing okay now. I've got no complaints at the way things are going,
Right.
but that's just where I want to take it. I want to see if I can do it.
Are you coming to the Bahamas?
Of course, I'm not going to miss that.
Are you guys coming to the Bahamas?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to miss it either, man. They'd be crazy too.
They better not.
It
It's gonna
was
be a
pretty
great time.
awesome last year. It was really cool. I went down there. You guys invited me down just to give a hand, and I think I did, but I learned a lot too.
Oh, you
just being
totally
on
helped
set.
us out. Are you kidding?
Well, I learned too, man, just being there. I picked up
Good.
a few little things that I've implemented into my workflow, and it's just made me a little bit better photographer. So it's pretty cool.
That's what we want to do.
People just you can see their mind kind of melt when you show them something that they've never seen before, especially when it's a super easy technique.
Right.
And they're just like, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing," and you can tell they're going to run home and do that first thing, So,
What's the craziest thing you did in the Navy?
no, I can't tell you that.
Classified? Or just can't go there?
I'd have to kill you.
So what do you like to shoot? What's your favorite stuff? Tech stuff.
Gadgets, electronics. Yeah, man, that stuff turns me on.
Why? What pulls you in?
I see. They're trying very hard to make one set of headphones look different from another set of headphones. In reality, you have two earpieces and a head thing, band that goes across
Right.
your head. How different can you make
Pretty
that?
simple.
Yeah, so the designers try very, very hard to make those look very different from each other. And in that design, there's subtleties, and I like trying to bring out the subtleties and stuff like that. That's what's cool. I love it. Anything electronic, anything that has power or plugs into something else is cool. I like to, if you've ever looked through my book, then you've seen, I like to use a lot of shadows, make very dramatic looking images. I don't mind parts of the image fading off to black. I like to have nothing else in the composition.
You come in tight.
Come in tight, leave some mystery. I like to imply things. You see a ear of a headphone, it's a headphone. You don't have to
Right.
see the whole set of headphones. The other side looks just like this side. You don't need to see them both, So I really like to just implications, imply things in the photographs so that they make their own imagination
Yeah,
finishes the rest of it.
you're raising questions in the viewer.
Right, yeah.
Like where's the rest of it? What's going on? And they have to think about it.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned in the tutorial, I try to do things light them and do composition in a way that people aren't used to seeing it. And that's what stops people and gets them stopping on an image is if I fully lit an object, you see it fully lit all the time. It looks that way on their package, it looks that way on your shelf, it looks that way
Right,
on your
it's boring.
table, whatever. It's boring. But when you only see a portion of it lit, that's not the way you usually see objects, you know? So that stops people in their tracks and adds interest. And that's the stuff I get most comments on. So that's what I produce.
Well, that's the number one job of a photographer is to get people to stop. Because there are millions of images out there.
Yeah,
I mean, there's just
tons.
a billion images. And people are reading very quickly, only with pictures, not with words.
Yeah.
So you've got to grab their attention as fast as you can and then get them to questions and they dive in and they want to know more about that product.
Right. I think that the newspapers are missing that. You know, they're laying off photographers, and I think they're undervaluing the images that were in the paper and how much impact they had to get people to read the paper. But I've talked to photographers that are worried about the future of photography, and they think that, well, you know, photography's dying, video is all the rage, and there's, you know, people are using less still images and using more video for things. But I challenge you to walk into any bookstore and go into the periodicals. There's magazines all
Everywhere,
over the shelves, and every one of those magazines is full of images on every page, you know. Photography's not going anywhere.
Or what I do, go down the grocery store aisles.
Yeah.
Frozen packages, are you kidding?
Every single one of them has
Everything has an image
Yeah,
on it.
all over the
Everything.
place.
A Triscuit's got an image on it. I mean, everything has images on it. It's impossible to get away with. So,
Yeah.
no, photography isn't dying. It's completely changing.
Absolutely.
It's changing very quickly. Digital photography is, without a question, it's a game changer, which is exactly why we're doing this company, because we want to elevate what people do.
Yeah. You know, have you dealt with the transition from film to photography? How was it for you? Know, I watched my family go through that transition, and it was a rough one. But how you were doing photography at the time of the transition? How did it?
Oh God, yeah! I started shooting, 4x5 and 8x10 films. So there was a lot of trepidation, I would say, in the beginning. It was like, is this really going to stick? Is it really going to work? And it was expensive stuff.
Were clients demanding it, or were you just doing it because you
No,
wanted to
you
be
know what?
cutting edge?
No. Clients were interested in it, and I think the first year that I had really made that transition, all of my bids had a bid for film and a bid for digital, and they were side by side. So
really?
yeah, everything was done in 2 columns, and it was film, digital, and they could make the comparison, and then they could make a judgment call on what they wanted to go with. I kind of feel like I waited a little bit to get into the digital game because it was changing so rapidly.
Right.
Every 6 months, all the computers and all the cameras that you bought were now trash because something was light years ahead of it.
Yeah.
6 months later, I mean, we
Yeah.
weren't even talking a year or 2 years. It was 6 months. It was happening so fast.
Right,
It's
right.
unbelievable. Up there is one of the first digital cameras out, the Kodak DCS, SCSI cord,
This monster.
monster
Yeah.
SCSI cord to a pack on your,
Right, yeah. Awesome.
ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. It's just when you think about it, and it's far less powerful than what would have been in an iPhone 3, camera-wise.
Right. You see the Sony A7 that I was shooting
Yeah,
with?
that
This
thing's
little
cool.
tiny thing that's a full frame.
It's
I mean, it's just
insane.
amazing, the technology.
So I think I personally made the transition nicely. I waited a little bit, jumped in, never looked back. I don't miss film. I really don't. It's kind of weird to say that.
Right.
But when you think about not being in the dark room and sloshing around all those chemicals, but you probably grew up, I grew up in a dark room. My father and I built a dark room in our basement together.
Yeah.
Spent hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and days in dark rooms. They're awesome.
You miss that smell? You probably can't smell anymore after hours in the dark room. It just-
I don't think I can remember. I think that's probably why my memory is so bad. Is all that.
that would make sense.
Inhaling
yeah.
chemical
Right.
all the time. It's ridiculous, but it's a good thing
Yeah.
at the end of the day. All right, so let's talk about some of the work. I have some right here.
I just happen to have some right here.
Mind if I whip this out?
Go for it, man. What are you looking at?
Breitling,
Yeah.
probably the most iconic image in your book, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
It's gotten you the most work.
Absolutely, without a doubt.
Tell us the story behind.
That was, remember I mentioned the electronic cigarettes company, which
Yeah.
was one of my third product photography jobs? Well, the marketing manager there that was handling that had bought that watch in Las Vegas on a winnings or something like that, and he needed to sell it.
He needed to sell it?
He needed to sell it. So he had brought me some electronic cigarettes to photograph for their business at one point in time. And right before he left, it was like, oh yeah, one more thing. I was wondering if you could do me a favor and take some pictures of my watch because I want to sell it on eBay. And I was like, what? You know?
Yeah, that's a random request.
Yeah, so he showed me this watch and it was that Breitling, and I was like, wow, dude, this is a pretty nice watch, you know? And he's like, oh yeah, this was an expensive watch and I want to sell it and get some money back, whatever, whatever his reasons were. And I said, yeah, I'll photograph it for you. I'll photograph the hell out of that watch. You know? So this was my first shot at doing jewelry or watches.
Right on.
This was the very first one I did, and I think I shot the hell out of that watch.
So what was your approach? You did shoot the hell out of it. Tell us about it. What was your approach?
You know,
it's a great shot.
This was years ago. It's the oldest image in my book by
Right.
far. And this was back probably 4 or 5 years ago that I shot this. It was really early in commercial photography, and I shot it on just a white table, and I shot real close up with a macro lens, and I did
What
focus
camera?
stacking. That was probably a 5D. I was shooting Canon at the time. I had a momentary lapse of sanity and went from Nikon to Canon, and I'm back to Nikon, and now I'm at phase 1. But any of the
Why do you say that? Why do you
any
say
of the
that?
Canon shooters are going to hate me for that.
Why do you say that though?
You know, you
what's
have your camps, you have your loyalties. You know, you're
Right.
either Nikon or Canon or Chevy or Ford or whatever the thing is. You know,
I've
there's
been
always
both. I
a thing.
shot Nikon for 20 years. Now I've been shooting Canon for, God, close to 10.
Yeah, I shot an FM when I was in film, and then I went to Nikon, and then I jumped to Canon for a little while with the 5D and the 5D Mark II, and then I went back to Nikon. Nikon glass is nice, but the big deal was it was weird. The function, it's got different ergonomics to it and stuff, and I just never got used to the Canon, so I went back to Nikon and I was way happier because it was just second nature for me, you know. So that was really it. There's, you know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I think, you know. But anyway, I shot it with a 5D, and Photoshop didn't have focus stacking at the time, and I didn't know about Helicon focus at the time. So
Was it even out?
I don't know.
I doubt it.
I don't know if it was even out,
Yeah.
which is probably why I didn't know about it.
That's smart boy.
But so I took a shot. I focused a little bit further. I took a shot, focused a little bit further, took a shot, and I did that all the way through the face of the watch until I realized I had them all in focus. And then I spent time in Photoshop
So you
painting in
masked
each area.
all this
I
in.
masked every single thing. I don't know how many shots across the face that I had to get, but
How many hours do you think are in the
oh
retouch
hell, I
of
don't
that?
know. You know, it needs to be
Days.
retouched because my skills then were
Totally
far
different.
inferior to
Right.
what they are now. You know, and I got a retoucher on staff. I don't even get behind the Wacom tablet much anymore, but you know, I still know how to do it, and I can do it when I need to, and I can do it pretty well, but I can do it a lot better now than I did it back then. So I need to, I think it would be kind of a fun experiment to take those raw
Yeah, you
files
absolutely
and
should go back to
reprocess it and
You should
just
go back
see
to
how it looks now compared to that, you know. But that image does get me a lot of work. That's a stunning image. I know that, and the clients realize that, and they always stop on that and go, "Oh, wow, that's cool." Even if it's not jewelry that I'm trying.
You know, you bring up a good point when you talk about you've got a retoucher on staff, but you still need to know how to do it.
Yeah.
Because you need to communicate what it is you want to accomplish in retouching to your retoucher, even if you turn it over completely and you don't do it.
Yeah, you remember Days of Thunder with Tom Cruise and all that? And he's like a race car
Yeah,
driver.
Okay, where does this go?
He's a race car driver, and he's like, "What's wrong with the car?" He's like, "I don't know." And he's like, "You got to tell me what's it doing. I can't fix it if I don't know what it's doing." Well, it's the same thing in communicating with your retoucher.
Right.
He can't retouch it if you can't articulate to them what it is that you want done. You know, so if you know how to do it yourself, it makes the process a whole lot easier. You know?
I never thought we'd get to Tom Cruise in Days of Thunder in this interview,
know.
but we did. So there you have it. Blaze, the torch. That's a good story.
That's a recent photo.
Right. So we go from your oldest to probably your most recent, one right after the next.
That is probably, I'd have to look at the book, but yeah, that's probably my most recent image in there, or very close to it. We talked earlier about being able to get behind the camera and actually create images for your book and how little time there is to do that. We had just wrapped a huge project at the studio that had taken me, I don't know, a week or longer, and I had like a half a day that everybody was working on something, and I just didn't know what to do with myself, and there's probably a million things I could have done, but I said, you know what, I want to get behind the camera for a minute. I just was feeling it, and so I had this little creme brulee torch at the studio from, you know, shooting food or whatever. I thought that handle was kind of a really cool texture.
Great texture.
So I grabbed it off the shelf, I hung it up on a C-stand arm, and I started going at it to light it. So I had my studio manager and my studio assistant in the studio at the time, and they're watching the first few frames come in on the tethered computer, and they're like, you know, they didn't think much of it. You know, I'm like, you guys are crazy. This is going to be fantastic. You know, and so I'm capturing it in pieces, much like I did during the tutorial
Right.
here. And in pieces or in parts, it doesn't look like much. You know, but the mind's eye
Right.
had a totally different thing.
I
you
do
know?
that all the time too. Everything I shoot is in pieces, and
Yeah.
it's really hard to convey that to clients. Like, we're going to shoot for this part, we're going to shoot for that part, we're going to put it all together in post. It's a hard thing for them to like.
Yeah, and I tried to articulate that in the tutorial.
Even your own staff didn't get it.
They didn't get it, man, and they'd seen me do it before. But they're looking
Right.
at this and they're going, you know, they weren't feeling it, you know.
Right.
And they knew what I was going to do with it. I mean, they understand the process. They're editing it as we're speaking, you know.
Right.
And so I captured all these images, and then I got to a point when I lit the torch because I wanted to get that real flame. I didn't want to do it in post. I just thought, first thing people are going
you
to
gotta
ask
do the
me
real thing.
is that real? And I want to be able to say, yep, that's real, you know? So we figured out how to do it in post, and they're still just kind of watching. But as soon as I lit that up and I captured that next shot with that flame, all of a sudden, their whole attitude changed. They're like, oh, this is going to be pretty cool, you know? So then I sat down and I was like, I can't believe you doubted me in the first place, you know? So I sat down and I started editing this thing, and I got it put together, and it started coming together, and I dropped that background in post. That background, I shot it on a white background.
Okay.
And so I dropped that background in post, and I played with a few ideas, just dragging some gradients, playing with some different colors until I got something that I thought really made that thing pop. You know, I think I got the flame kind of in the dark part of the gradient, and
you
the
did.
rest of it is back by the light part of the gradient. And so that's all done in post. You know, that is probably, I don't know, half a dozen images to create the torch itself, and then another image for the background. It all came together, and I called them over and I said, what do you think? And they both just went, oh my God, you know, that's amazing, you know, and that's the same reaction I get from a lot of people that see it now. Spent maybe an hour shooting, half hour shooting, an hour editing on that, you know, whole image. Hour and a half, one of the coolest images in my book, I think, and others seem to think. So
Not only that, it got you work.
yeah, so
How'd you get work off
yeah,
of this?
so I
This is a
took
good story.
that and I posted that image onto social media. Well, the manufacturer saw it and contacted me and said, we love this image, we'd love to license this image for social media, our own stuff, you know, et cetera, et cetera. We went back and forth in some conversation via email, and then of course, when I was coming down here, we were looking for products to shoot. I thought, gosh, let's call those guys. You know, they were cool, and that's a recent project, and I'm sure they got more cool stuff to shoot. So they sent it down, and we went through the exact same process that I did for that image on a tutorial, and we're going to do the same post-process techniques that I did on that one in the tutorial. So hopefully that will turn out to be just as cool of an image as I got in the book. So. It was a lot of fun, and it's always fun when people are doubting you. That just makes you try that much harder. It's like, oh,
Right.
really? You don't think it's
Egg-
going to look good?
eggs you
Okay,
on, yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Now it's on. You know, so I
crow.
got on it. You know, and hopefully there'll be a client. You know, they may buy this tutorial and start creating the images themselves. You know, I showed them exactly how to do it. So
They'll know how.
yeah, that's
Right.
true. So I don't know, but you know, that's kind of a cool thing. Social media is a cool avenue for marketing these days, and I managed to turn just a portfolio thing into business. You know.
Right on. Let's talk about maybe the AirCat
Aircat, yeah.
drill. It's cool.
They had gone through a lot of different shooters in my area, and they were redesigning a website or something, and the web designer, they had asked them to get some new images of some of their products for the website, and they had asked the web designer for recommendations, and finally the web designer said, call Tony Roseland when it comes to products. You know, he can do what you're looking for. They wanted some real dramatic. They wanted everything on black, you know. And so when they called me, the people that referred them, I knew the agency, but I'd never done business with the agency that had referred them to me for the photos, you know. So I guess it could have gone through an agency, but it ended up being direct instead, and it maybe had to do with budgetary constraints or something, you know, so the agency may have been trying to save them some money by having them go direct to a photographer or whatever. AirCat's actually a really large company. They manufacture tools for Snap-on and Mac and some of the big tool companies. They have all their eggs in those baskets, so I think they're trying to build their own brand in order to get a little bit of a separation from that.
So they do private labeling, but now they want to have their own.
Right,
So
exactly.
they're going to compete with the guys they're actually private labeling for.
Yeah, yeah, but I think they have to come up with some different SKUs and things. You know,
Right.
I don't know how all that works, and I don't really care. All I know is that they articulated what they were after to me. Strong. You know, what's funny is that direct clients, unlike agency, and I think I mentioned this in the tutorial too, is they'll look at my book and they go, "We want one of those for our image," you know, and you're like, well, yours is a big hunk of metal tool, and this is a sexy piece of jewelry or headphones or whatever. That's not the same product, but they don't care. All they know is they want theirs to have the same feeling that that image in your book has, you know. And it's like, okay, now I got to figure out how to make that happen, you know. So, and that's exactly what they did. They pointed to another image that's in my book, and they said, "We want that for our tools."
Which image?
There's another set of headphones. I think it's an orange set of Sennheiser headphones. Yep.
Yep.
They pointed to that, and they said, "We want that for our tools." And so there's a process there in trying to figure out what is it about that image that you like and what is it that you want me to incorporate into your photos, you know?
What do you think it is?
Well, after some conversation and going over some other images and things with them and some ideas, they wanted rim light on black background is what they wanted.
I was going to say it's line.
Yeah.
It's all about the form. I mean, it's really simple. It's on black. It's very graphic. It's all about line.
Yep, white line, black line.
Right. Yeah.
I've got a really cool technique. You should.
You should share it with me.
Yeah,
sometime.
I will. I'll share that with you. So,
I taught him everything he knows.
yeah, I get it. For those of you who are watching the interview and went through the tutorial where we show white line, black line, that technique I actually got from Mr. Rob Grimm. So I didn't give him credit in the tutorial, but I'm officially giving him credit now. So I got that technique from him. I had a different technique for that, and the way that Rob showed me, that I showed you, is way easier than the way that I was doing it.
How much time do you think it saved you?
Oh God, I don't know. To transition from one to the other, that's where all the time saving
Right.
is. Transitioning from one to the other. You get two totally different looks in a matter of seconds.
Seconds.
Yeah.
Versus hours.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, maybe an hour to fully
Right.
break it
Flip
down,
flip
set
that
up a
set.
whole different set and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, I mean that's a big process. So, anyway, that's what they wanted. They were looking for that sexy kind of rim lit on black background. So we've been doing that for them for years. And you know, this was another one where I went in high and they went for it, and we set a precedent early on, and they've been a good client for years. Unfortunately, this year, well, not unfortunately for them, unfortunately for me, this year they sold the company to a much larger company, so I'm no longer shooting for them. So
Yeah, that happens a lot.
yeah, and they were a good client, so that was kind of a kick to the gut, you know.
That has happened to me many times. In my
I got
career.
that email and it was like, we're letting everyone know we've been bought by XYZ on the other side of the country, and they're taking over everything, and they have all their in-house stuff and you know. And I looked at the rest of my crew and I was like, well, we lost AirCat, you know.
Right.
And so that was kind of a kick to the gut. Fortunately, I think that same week we picked up somebody else that was a large client for us. So it was like, all right, it was a trade out, you know. And that happens, you know.
It does happen. I think in my career, I don't know that I've ever had the same client be the biggest client 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
It
You
just doesn't happen because they change, they move, you know, you do a library of images for them so they don't need you
Right,
the next year.
right.
Or they get bought. And at first it may sound, oh, this is going to be great. They've got a whole bunch more stuff. Well, they may go somewhere else. So there's that, you know, that real kind of
Yeah.
up and down with the business that you just have to deal with. It's
Yeah, the
part of it.
people that you built your relationships with are no longer at that company.
Right.
You know, and that's
But hopefully they're going to go somewhere else.
Right.
They're going to take you with them.
yeah.
And it'll kick back in a different form.
Yeah, and I try to keep those relationships in that sense, you know, and it, you know, the
You just lost your train of thought.
totally lost it. Yeah.
All right, well, you know what? I want to shift gears a little bit because I want to talk about your architectural work.
Okay.
I do because, you know, if people follow you, they know that that's a big part of what you do.
Yeah.
It's obviously not related to this tutorial at all because we're just doing product. But
Architecture is
it's a
just
big
a big
thing.
product, man.
all right,
That's how I look at it. It requires the
about it.
same. It requires the same skill sets: attention to detail, You got to make sure there's contrast at where all your surfaces meet. This is the same thing I talked about in the tutorial. You have one flat surface here, one flat surface here. One needs to be light, one needs to be dark. There has to be contrast, or else it just looks like one big flat plane.
Right. Shape.
Yeah.
Shape of a
You're
room,
shaping
shape of a
objects.
building, right.
You're just shaping buildings. It's the same exact concept. It's just on a much bigger scale.
Your architecture work, I think, is really clean. It's polished.
Thank you.
Really, really polished. It's nice. So you approach architecture as you would a product. You look at it for form.
Exactly the same way.
All right, good.
It's just bigger and it takes longer to shoot usually.
Yeah, overnight.
Yeah, I usually do. You see a lot of my stuff at night. That's kind of our style. How am I going to incorporate my product style, which is always kind of a dark half lit, into architecture? And that's how I do it. So you can see a similarity between those two shooting styles there, and people really dig it because it's not something they're used to seeing. Normally, architecture is real bright and airy and lit, but this is a totally different technique, and people have responded pretty well to it. We've been doing very well with architecture lately.
That's a great lesson for people to really hear, really hear this. Your style on product, you translate it into another genre by going out and doing architecture, but you're not doing it in the bright, typical way that other people are doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing it in your style, putting your stamp on it, so it fits.
Yeah, one thing that my family have pounded into my head from the very beginning of my career in photography is worry about yourself, don't worry about anybody else. And so I've tried to do that, and you and I had a conversation earlier about, finding other people in your area and seeing what they're doing and keeping up with what's going on just to keep yourself relevant in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that you want to try to build your business mimicking what they're doing, you know? So I've always tried to build my business doing what it is that I'm good at and worrying about myself and let other people start to worry about me. And it works.
If you're just mimicking, the top guy in your market, you're just a cheaper version.
Exactly. Yeah.
So why would they go with you?
So figure out your style, follow that style,
Find it,
and try to apply it to everything that you do, and it carries over very well, in this case, to architecture, and it's worked out very well for us.
How long do you think it took you to realize you had a style? Okay, I'm
recently,
here.
very recently.
So most of the time that you've been shooting, it took you several years to get there and say, okay.
Several.
This is my style. This is definitively Tony Roseland. This sets me apart.
Yeah, and it wasn't until I was asked the question, and I forgot who asked it. It was another interview or podcast or something at one time, and they said, "How do you define your style?" And it kind of stumped me.
That was going to be my next question.
And I said,
how would you define your style now?
Clean, simple, dramatic, and minimalist. Those are the 4 words: clean, simple, dramatic, and minimalist. I think that it's clean lines. You see all the clean lines of a product. They're simple. There's not a lot of props in the shot. It's dramatic. It's got usually nice heavy shadows in the image, and then it's minimal. I only show enough of an image to give to imply something, enough so they know what the product is or the building is, but not so much that I'm giving away everything,
When you started your career, do you think that those definitive words were coming through, or did it take you a while to get there?
No, I was all over the map, dude.
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. I'm all over the map. I'm shooting from data, trying all different. What I was shooting is what everybody else was doing. I was trying to shoot I was looking at what other people were doing, and I was trying to mimic the shot, which was good. It was a great learning experience. There's nothing better than trying to reverse engineer what somebody else did and make it look the same way. If you can take what somebody else did and you can reverse engineer that and make it look exactly the same way, then you've taught yourself a valuable lesson.
It's education.
And then when somebody comes to you and wants something that looks like that, if you can execute it that way, hey, that's gold. You have that skill set now.
Right.
So I did a lot of that, and I was all over the map, and I didn't realize that I needed a style. I didn't realize that I didn't have a style. It wasn't until people started responding to certain images that I started going, okay, well, people are really responding to these. Let me do some more like this. And I just kind of got pigeonholed into a look, and that's what I go for. And it's not so narrow that it's like, well, if you want dark dramatic, go to this guy. but it's definitely, if you want highly stylized, heavily propped looks, like editorial type photos, I'm probably not your guy. And as a result, I don't get a lot of call for editorial style images. Ad images that need to fill a full page with a little bit of room for copy, yeah, I get calls for that stuff, you know?
So was there an epiphany? Was there a point where you said, here it is, here's my style?
I don't think so. I just kind of flipped through the book one day and it was like, wow, all these images kind of look the same. And I started taking out the ones that didn't fit. You know,
yeah.
you build your book and you're like, this goes with this, and this goes with this, and this doesn't go with anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's
gotta take it out.
You know,
right.
Or you got to create something else that does go with it. One of the two. You know,
Right.
And maybe I will. That image might come back someday. You know, if I have something else that fits, we can put them both in there together. You know, but for now, the image that doesn't fit is going away. You know, so.
Okay, so we're talking about stuff that fit or don't fit in your book. You pulled things out.
You're going to show me the bird image, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to show you the bird image.
That's in there specifically for that reason. It makes people stop and go,
What the hell?
You know, people start flipping through your book, especially on a digital version. When
Right.
they flip through so fast, they start missing stuff. That's in there to slow them down.
Really?
Yeah, slows them down. They stop,
Placeholder.
they look at it, and they go, what in the world is
interesting.
this about? And then I get to talk about it a little bit.
Right.
And what I tell them is that those are birds, rare birds. They're actually stuffed. Those
Taxidermy.
are taxidermied. Yep.
Yeah.
So those are taxidermied birds. I didn't stuff them. I don't want PETA calling me, but these. I was hired by a local ad agency to photograph an editorial for a magazine on a world-renowned fly tyer with Parkinson's. The guy's name is John Newbery. He was the first inductee to the Hall of Fame for fly tying. Guy's
Okay.
amazing.
There is a Hall of Fame for fly tying?
Dude, there's a Hall of Fame for everything.
Holy
But
cow.
the guy
Tying
is
flies?
Yeah, the guy's
Hall of
amazing.
Fame?
Yeah, you know, these
Where is it?
fly tying is a rich man's sport, so it makes sense that they have a Hall of Fame they
Where
can
is
go
the
to
Hall of
and
Fame?
celebrate each other every year. I have no idea, dude. I don't know.
I kind of want to go there.
Yeah, well, it's probably pretty interesting because these guys do some amazing stuff. If you've got Parkinson's and you're tying flies, you're pretty much a bad dude.
Yeah,
you know?
that's pretty incredible. You think
Yeah.
about fighting through the shakes to tie
Right.
these
So
little tiny things, right?
they're doing an article on. They did an article on John Newbery who had Parkinson's, and I had to go to his house and photograph him doing tying all these flies.
Okay.
And while we were there, of course, we needed to shoot some B-roll footage of various things that he uses, you know, some of his tools, some of his props. A lot of the materials that he uses to tie flies are feathers from various rare birds and things. That's what makes his flies so unique, is a lot of the materials are very rare and hard to find. Well, he was raising these birds at one time.
Okay.
He's got big acreage. This is up in Washington, the sticks, you know, and so these were some of his birds that were taxidermied. I shot these in the garage with no strobes. This is daylight,
Nice.
and I shot them with 5D Mark II, I think at the time is what
Pretty.
I had. And I put a white bed sheet. I asked him for a bed sheet, and he came out. And these are mounted on like these wall mount things, you know? So I hung this white bed sheet behind him to give me some room to do a knockout, you know.
Right.
And I tell you what, if you've ever tried to knock out feathers, good Lord, hire somebody else. It's just not worth your time. It's one of the most.
Yeah, send it overseas.
Oh my gosh, it's one of the hardest things to do, but I learned my lesson on that. And so I knocked those out, and they made this killer publication. I got to show this thing to you sometime.
Yeah.
It's a really cool publication. It's called Proof Magazine, and there's just page after page, a story about John Newbery, and then all of these fly little B-roll things that I did. And then right in the centerfold, I shot almost 100 flies, each one.
Oh,
and
cool.
they're little tiny things, some of them smaller than my thumb. And I hung them on in a dark studio on this little tungsten wire.
Right.
And I couldn't see the wire because it's thinner than a human hair, you know, and I'm trying to hang these little flies on this wire. And
That
the
you
reason-
can't see.
Yeah, and I had to use that because they're so small that there's no way you can Photoshop out something larger between all those
Right,
feathers.
cutting through all the feathers,
Yeah, there's
right.
just no way, you know. So I did that in a darkened studio, and I went through all of these things. It took me, I don't know how long, it took me forever to do these things. Some of them, they wanted group shots, and we shot them. I glued them on to the top of a head of a pin and stuck the pin into some board and then shot down on them, you know.
Wow, cool.
It was just totally crazy. But I parlayed that
Problem
into
solving.
various shows in the area, gallery showings. I've done a couple gallery showings with, I blew them up 2 feet by 2 feet and mounted them and framed them.
Right on.
People aren't used to seeing flies
That
this
kind,
big,
yeah.
you know. So I did a gallery with, I don't know, 20, 30 images. And then I got asked to do another gallery at a bar and restaurant called Steelhead, which is appropriate because steelhead fish. So
Sure.
these are steelhead flies. So I put a whole bunch of images in there, sold out the show.
Nice.
Yeah, it's awesome. I get calls every single year from people who want to buy those prints for a loved one in their family. They ate at that restaurant or went to that gallery show and their loved one was flipping out over these fly prints and they took them forever to track me down or whatever. They finally found me and they want to buy some fly prints. So we're coming up on that time. I'm sure that by the time I get home from being here at RGG EDU, I'm probably gonna have several prints I need to make up and mount to sell. So it turned into this really cool project.
Who knew?
Yeah,
Right?
right. And I learned a ton from it. So it was really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
20 years ago, I was involved in a job. I was an assistant at the time, maybe more than 20 years ago. We actually did do taxidermy on chickens. I think it was for Southwestern Bell, and we had to do the shot of them in the desert, where they were them. We had to do a shot of chickens in the desert, and the art director, had sketched out exactly what he wanted. I remember very clearly with the photographers I was working for, going to this farm, this chicken farm, picking out the chickens, and telling the taxidermist how they should be set.
Oh my gosh.
It's totally crazy.
You'd have people going crazy.
Oh
over
yeah,
that
PETA
these
would be
days.
all over
oh
us
my
these
gosh,
days. But
yeah.
it's a good shot. It's really cool. I love the story behind that. It's fun.
It's just
different.
interesting. It's probably one of those shots that means more to anybody else that will ever see it,
Right.
that are hard to get out of your book, but I've left it in there. In fact, it wasn't in my book for a while, but I put it in because I found people
It's
doing
calculated,
this.
yeah, it's a calculated
And then I
move.
was like, slow down, and I
So
put that
are
in
you-
there and they go, and they're like, what is this?
Are
And then
you
we start to
showing your
talk
book
about the
only digitally? Do you have a printed version?
I have a printed version that's all in pieces, and I'm trying to get it printed again right now. But time, man. Trying to move to
'Cause I-
Seattle and trying to do everything else I'm doing, and
I went to this, and then I backed away from it. I went in with both the printed book and the iPad, and I found that people stop and go slower, and they feel the prints, and they're like,
makes sense.
it slows them down.
I'm gonna do both. Is
Yeah, that's
the
a good way to
ultimate,
go.
but the problem is that right now I'm in this transition of getting rid of some old images, putting in some new images.
It's a hard thing to do.
We've been very busy lately, and you really need to pay attention when you structure your book. You know this, I'm not telling you anything.
Nope.
This is more for them, but you got to pay attention to what you're putting in there, how it's going to make somebody feel who's flipping through the book, and make sure that you're taking them on a roller coaster ride through
Right.
emotions. You can't go from something that's very light and happy to something that's dark and depressing. It doesn't flow well. You
Right.
got to build that flow, and I need to pay attention to that. And rather than just printing off a bunch of images and shoving them in a book, I thought that let me take my time. Let me get through the holidays here with the family and all the other stuff that I need to do end of year, and then in beginning of 2015. We'll reset and we'll take some time to put it together right, and I'll start doing both the digital and the print book whenever we go.
The digital is a great way to actually look at pagination, to kind of flip through it, but it doesn't act like a printed book.
Right.
I will print everything out, even if it's on crappy paper. I'll just print it all out and cut it and lay it across a series of tables or the kitchen counter and look at how spreads work and
Right.
how when you flip the page, what changes? What emotion are you going to from one page to the next? I don't know, it's a great process to go through, to actually print everything out, look at it, move it around, change it up, throw stuff out, put stuff back in.
Throw stuff out. You do new work and you look at your old work and you go, oh my gosh, I got to
Oh, I
get rid
know.
of that.
I know, I look at my early work, I'm like, holy cow, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a little tough. When I was mounting and hanging prints and stuff in the studio more often, which I don't do it nearly as much these days, but trying to have more of a gallery type of an environment in the studio.
Right.
I'd do something new, I'd mount it, I'd print it, I'd hang it up, and I'd look at what was next to it and go, oh, that's got to come out.
You got a good little video on how to mount prints, though.
Yeah, it was kind of something that's a lost art these days for photographers. At one time, everything was mounted and printed
Right.
in the world that I grew up in.
Oh, me too. I
portraits.
still have a dry mount press back there. It was
Yeah.
my dad's, It's been
there
around
was
forever.
that was a big skill for a photographer to have,
Right.
and it's just not anymore.
Right.
And so I don't expect everybody to go out and buy a press these days. So I showed them an easier way that they can do it just by hand,
That's cool.
mounting and doing prints. And we've got, that's probably, of all the videos I've done over the past year, that one has definitely got us the most views and driven traffic to a website.
That's interesting.
You know?
One of the oldest techniques
Yeah,
is giving you the most views. You know?
comes around.
Yeah.
You know? It's a lost art and
Right.
it's come around. I bet if I did something on film, it'd probably be the next highest thing. I did, you know?
Could be. Could be. Well, this has been a good insight into some of your work. I can't wait to see what you do with the book next, because you're going to revamp the whole thing. Which will be
Yep,
cool.
we got a view camera coming. We're going to put the digital back on. We're going to play
Nice.
around with some movements on that view camera
Yeah.
and see if we can create some really.
Going old school, man.
We're going old school, right?
Right.
Maybe I should do a video on it. Well,
You should totally do a video on it. Maybe we should do a tutorial on how to use a view camera.
We're doing old school, man. It's
Right.
but it works, and it's still around. It's cumbersome. It takes longer. It's more difficult to use than just using an SLR or medium format camera. But I think that the image quality is unparalleled. If you have the time to use it, then use it.
Right.
And it's just time is a big problem. Everybody wants everything yesterday.
Yeah, which is why I moved away from view cameras on the job.
Right.
It slows you down. I love them. I was weaned on them, literally. And like I said, I shot 8x10. 8x10 film.
Yep. Well, I'll use it for my book.
Right.
I'll create some new images with it. And even if I can't use it for client jobs, just due to the time constraints, I'll at least have
You'll
some
have it,
killer images for my book,
Cool. So Tony, let's talk about your experience here this week at RGG EDU. What'd you think?
Epic.
Pretty
Period.
big, right?
Period, yeah, epic. I mean, this was amazing. We covered so much material in so little time that I thought my head was going to implode.
It's kind of interesting, because when you're on set for an entire week, there's a lot that's covered,
Yeah.
and people don't even have the slightest clue how much preparation goes into. I mean, this is
No,
months of
months.
planning.
Yeah, we've been
months
working
of
on this
planning,
for
building
months.
the curriculum,
Yep.
going back over it and over and over it to distill it into the best teaching moments we can give people.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Is that I really tried to give teaching moments here. I think the images are going to be awesome out of the after we
Yeah.
get through with the editing and stuff. But more than that is all of the teaching moments along the way to get there. And that's what I was most concerned with. Was let me share my process and let me talk about, rather than saying if I do this, it's not going to work. Let me demonstrate why it's not going to work. Let me show them what happens so that they don't have to go and figure it out for themselves.
And they need to know that even people who've been in the business for a while make mistakes.
There's no magic here. It's all
There might be on my sets.
okay. Well, I wouldn't disagree. All right, I've seen some of the stuff you do. It looks like magic to me still, but the idea here is that it's a process. And we all go through the same. It's a creative process.
Right.
Everybody has that creative process. It may be different for each of us, for you and me and anybody else who is watching. It's going to be a different creative process, but we're all artists in our own right, and we're all going to have a different way of hopefully getting to a similar end result, and that's creating images that are saleable. Period.
Absolutely.
So
And at the end of the day, these images really aren't for us.
yeah, no,
They're for the client.
absolutely.
To sell their product. They're not for us.
And that's a hard thing to wrap your head around.
Oh, it's real hard.
Especially if you've just been shooting for your book. Everything you've shot so far is for your book, and now you have to create something for a client, and you just have this need to interject your own vision into
Yeah,
it.
you
but
got to let your ego
it's not about your
wash
vision.
away.
Yeah, it's not about your vision. It's about their vision and making that a reality.
Or blending the two, where you bring, your skill set and the things that you can do to elevate their vision and kind of get them where they need to be. But at the end of the day, they drive the bus.
Yeah, they've hired you because of your vision.
Right.
You've already proven yourself, or they wouldn't be standing next to you, during the shoot.
Right.
So now you just have to deliver. There's no stress in that, right?
No.
So, with RGG EDU here in the past week, going through this stuff, there's cameras everywhere, and I'm trying to remember all of the things to talk about, all of the things that I'm going through, and all I really want to do is just think about the process and get creative into it, and it's really hard to balance talking about what I'm doing with actually doing it and still coming out with a cool image in the end. And
Yeah, but that's a cool thing because you get to share everything that you're doing. You explain the process, which people really need.
Yeah.
You know, they need to understand how we achieve these images, how we work through it, and you know, it's invaluable.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to share their info. They're
Yeah.
not willing to put it out there, but you know, we want to elevate this business. We want everybody to have a shot at getting better.
Yeah, and I
period.
think they'll be surprised when they see the process that
Yeah.
there's no magic formula to make stuff happen. There's a lot of eye and trying different things and finding out what works. And then once you have tried something enough, you know what's going to happen when you put a light here or you put
Right.
a card here, so you know which card to grab or which light modifier to use.
Right.
And that just takes experience. You know, I think we've given them some shortcuts to that
A
experience.
ton of shortcuts. Are you kidding? You just shaved years off these people's
Right.
educational life.
Right.
Just shaved years off them.
Yeah, you know, so they're
good.
getting they're kind of taking the express lane to a lot of this stuff.
Right.
You know, and it's just been really cool. You guys got some great staff that are really concerned with making sure that we articulate exactly what it is that we're doing at various parts of the process. You know, there was more than one time that we had to cut, and it was like, you got to do that again. And I'm like, really? That was perfect. What are you talking about? Yeah, it was perfect,
Has
but
to
you
be more
didn't tell us
perfect.
how you got there.
Right.
You know, and it was like, oh, you know. But you just get hung up in the process, and you start to forget that, oh yeah, I'm on camera. I got to tell these guys what it is that I'm doing. You know, so. It really was a unique experience, a fun one, an exhausting one, but all in all, I'm really psyched to see how viewers respond to the whole thing.
We're happy to have you on board.
I'm excited to see what people do with the information, especially in the Facebook group. That
Yeah.
thing's cool. You get to see people ask questions, and you know they watched it because they're asking specific questions about the tutorials, and they're, how did you do this? Or I'm having trouble with this, and I'll upload an image, and you get to see what they created. You're like, that's really pretty good,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, we've been impressed with a lot of the images.
Yeah,
that we've seen
I'm
come through.
looking in the-
and they have access to us. I mean, we're not holding back.
Right.
We're in there. We're talking with them. It's a very cool community that we're building.
Yeah, I've given some feedback to a few people in there,
Right.
you know, and even before we recorded the tutorial, just
Right.
because it was coming up, and so I've been a member of the group for a while, and I've seen some people posting some various things in there and giving back whatever feedback I can, and there's some real talent in that group.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to
It's
be
good.
really cool
I
to
know.
see what they do with this stuff and watch some of this stuff come in. What I'm curious to see is if they try to shoot the same products that we shot in a tutorial and how they approach it and how they turn out.
See
and to
everybody's style, yeah.
see what people's style
Right.
is and see what they do differently than what I did. You know, I mean, it's the same product, but they're all going to look a little bit different. You know, so I can't wait for that. That's going to be one of the most fun.
Well, we're
fun
super
parts.
excited that you were willing to do this and share your knowledge with the audience and really kind of shave years off of their trial and error
Yeah,
period.
yeah.
It's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I'm glad you guys asked me out for this. Flattered, to say the least, and it was one of the most epic experiences that I've had so far in my photography career.
Awesome, epic. Keep coming back.
Yeah,
then.
it was awesome. Yeah.
So listen, I want to thank you for coming out and spending the time to share all of your information with us and our audience. I think that you have given them an incredible amount of knowledge that is really going to help them propel their books forward. So
Man.
thank you for doing that.
Pleasure was absolutely all mine. I had
Good,
a
come
blast
back.
doing it. I thought you guys were great, and I look forward to seeing what these guys do with everything.
All right, good. We'll have you back too. So take a look at Tony's work at TonyRoseland.com. And don't forget to come back to rggedu.com to see the tutorials that we have available for you.